Well, actually, I want to raise a question to Jerome, which is related to my presentation. So maybe I will present it to Jerome when I have finished my presentation. Hello everyone. I'm a PhD student from University of Pittsburgh, and first I'm real grateful to thank Professor Levi Weidman to make me have a chance to give a presentation here. And first, this is we have a special issue of this conference at the journal Quantum Reports. Sometimes it makes me not very comfortable. Can you hear me as this was? Okay. And this is the introduction of the special issue of our conference at Quantum Reports. And here the line is one important question is, does self-location uncertainty solve the probability problem? And mainly this is the topic I'm going to discuss in my presentation. I mean, well, why we will need to have a self-location uncertainty? The motivation of this approach is that, well, there is the so-called that we need to solve the so-called incoherence problem. That is to say, well, it seems that there is no uncertainty in the Everett quantum mechanics. And to make our talk about probability to make sense, we need to maybe we need to have some kind of uncertainty. And how do we construct this kind of uncertainty would be a kind of problem to understand probability in Everett quantum mechanics. But in my discussions, I will just constrain myself in the discussions of the uncertainty before the branching. As far as I know, that maybe Professor Levi Weidman claims that we may have the uncertainty only after the branching, but we do not have such kind of uncertainty before the branching. Maybe that Weidman is correct, or maybe he's not right. But I will only constrain myself to discuss the kind of uncertainty before branching in my presentation. And before the main point of my presentation, first I want to make several points. That is to say, I think some contemporary literature to talk about this question will focus on some discussions of actually the ontology of what is a word in many words interpretation, what is a branch in many words interpretation. And this picture is adopted from Wallace's book, the Emergent Multiverse, and here he wants to argue that there's many different views to argue what is a branch or what is a word in many words interpretation. And the Lewis view, you see the shadowed one here represents different understandings of what is a branch or what is a word in many words interpretation. But my point also an anonymous reviewer also told me that, well, it is still an ongoing debate now in the literature of many words interpretation, that whether there are the different branches of the different words, they are overlapping or they are not overlapping. And here, these small sentences, this descriptions is adopted from Wallace's reading list of many words interpretation. That is, can branching be understood as a process of linear uncertainty for the branched agent? Do we really have branching or just the divergence of initially identical branches? And here, I understand the second question, do we really have branching or just divergence of just the divergence of initially identical branches? This is how do we understand the ontology of a branch or word or physical objects in many words interpretation? And I think at least these roots of debates to understand the uncertainty and probability in many words interpretation is at least in some degree misleading. And I want to make initially I want to make 2 points. The first is that, Andrew, give a bit for the microphone. Yeah, see, help, oh, thanks, okay. Well, first point is that, well, as far as we know, to our contemporary understanding of the many words interpretation approach is that, well, the object of the word branching is just some kind of emergent figure, emergent pattern of the whole universe, of the whole description of many words interpretation. And that to say, Darwin Wallace once in his paper published in Studies in 2002, he figured out that, he argued that, well, whether one object exists within the many words interpretation or not, it depends on its usefulness for that description, whether we can use that notion of an object to describe some causal relations, kind of this. Hence, if an object in many words interpretation is just an emergent pattern, then it's still that a word, a branch in many words interpretation is also some kind of emergent pattern. And still, if they are both emergent pattern, it seems to me that the identity of a word, of different words and identity of different branches, the identity of different physical objects in many words interpretation are still some kind of emergent pattern. And as I quoted, this is from Darwin Wallace's paper in Studies in 2003, that there is a concept of transtemporal identity for patterns, but again, it is only approximate to say that a pattern P2 at time T2 is the same pattern as some pattern P1 at time T1, is to say something like P2 is causally determined largely by P1, and there is a continuous sequence of gradually changing patterns between them, but this concept will not be fundamental or exact and may sometimes break down. So I think this argument, this claim also applies to the discussions of words or branches in many words. That is to say, maybe, well, this is the figure, well, maybe in many words interpretations, the branches might be overlapping or they might not be overlapping. But I don't think that these discussions has any philosophical significance. It is, I don't understand. I don't see that these discussions is meaningful, because they are just some descriptions of our emergent patterns, and whether different words, different branches in many words interpretation, whether they are overlapping or not, just depends on our usefulness of how do we describe these things. And actually, if we understand that different branches, they do overlapping or they do not, this will not increase this will not increase our knowledge to understand the quantum state, to understand the whole universe. We may know everything about useful for us to understand the universe if we just understand how the quantum state involve, or we may just need to understand some properties of the local variables of the whole universe. But whether the different branches are overlapping or not will not increase our understandings of the whole universe. And the second point is that I don't think that, our contemporary route to solve the incoherence problem is to give an account of personal identity. But these discussions of the identity of branches, words, or physical objects, they do not necessarily lead to a concrete understanding of personal identity. That is to say, I don't think that exactly the identity of physics objects and the identity of words are actually the same questions of the personal identity in Everett quantum mechanics. Maybe the relation of personal identity is grounded in our understandings of the identity of different words, but to giving an account of the identity relation between different words does not necessarily lead to a full-fledged theory of personal identity in Everett quantum mechanics. So I think we just need to turn to pay attention to the question of personal identity if we really want to use such self-location to solve that uncertainty problem. But rather, we may not need to pay much attention on these ontological discussions of what is a branch, what is a word in Everett quantum mechanics. So here is the background of the discussion, and actually these pictures are adopted from Darwin Lewis's paper, survival and identity. The background is that we suppose that at this point, unobservable Alice, he wants to measure the spin of an electron at this point, and he has a 50% probability to observe that the spin of the electron is up, and he has a 50% of probability to observe that the spin of that electron is down, and it seems that, well, this figure illustrates the process of the fishing or the branching after the measurement of Alice to measure that spin of that electron, Well, actually, this problem is discussed a lot in traditional literature of personal identity. Well, first, there are three different accounts of personal identity in literature. The first is the Parfit's account of personal identity. In short, it just says that according to Parfit, it just says that, well, personal identity is not meaningful. It is just not important in our discussions, in our understandings of this process, and maybe personal identity is a relation with some degree, or it is not a determined relation. It is not a transitive relation. But anyway, according to Parfit, this just does not account. So in my discussions, I will not talk about the Parfitian's account, since it cannot be used to use personal identity to solve the uncertainty problem. And second is the Darby-Lewis account. I will give you a description of what is a Darby-Lewis account later. And third is the Theodor's account of personal identity. Well, actually, according to Theodore Theda, a person is just a temporal stage here, and maybe here the stage Alice down, well, is a counterpart of this stage, and this is also a counterpart of this stage. But well, maybe we can call the relation between counterparts as kind of identity. Maybe, I don't know, but just that this stage share the relation with this stage share the relation with this stage, but these two stages not counterparts at all. But maybe we can use the Theodore Theda's account to solve the probability problem in Emmanuel's quantum mechanics. As far as I know, that Paul Chapton and Peter Lewis are supporters of this kind of view, but I suggest just that I will not discuss this view in my presentation, because I just want to focus on what are the consequences if we want to use the Darby-Lewis account to solve the problem of uncertainty in quantum mechanics. Well, first I will say that the motivation of Darby-Lewis's account of personal identity is that he wants to give us a response to Parfit. You know that from Parfit, if there exists some kind of relation as personal identity, it is not a determined. It is not a transitive relation, and that is to say, whether this person here and this person here, whether they are identical, according to Parfit, this is a problem of some kind of degree, and according to Darby-Lewis, he just wants to save the notion of identity as a transitive and determined relation, and his step is just to say, well, he understands the person as a four-dimensional entity, and to say, well, before the branching, there is actually two persons. One is Alice up, and the other is Alice down. And Alice up is just the sum. It's just the mereological sum of all these person stages along this line. And Alice down is just the sum of the four-dimensional sum of all these stages along this line. So in this case, there are at least two persons, and these two persons are four-dimensional. And according to Darby-Lewis, these kind of the three-dimensional are represented by the quantum state Alice 0. This is kind of, according to Darby-Lewis, it is called a person stage. It is three-dimensional. And according to Darby-Lewis, the identity here is saved as a transitive relation, because identity here is just a relation between these four-dimensional entity, between it and itself. So this four-dimensional person is identical to himself, and this is identical to himself. And rather, Lewis called this relation between these different person stages as the so-called I relation. But then he said that the I relation is not identity, and the I relation will fail to be transitive if and only if there is a partial overlap among continuant persons. And actually, well, in 2008, there was a paper published in the British Journal for the Philosophy of Science that Saunders and Wallace first are trying to give us rule to explain where is the uncertainty in Everett quantum mechanics. And if I understand it correctly, in this 2008 paper, they just follow the rules of Darby-Lewis that before the branch, there are two different persons. So actually, maybe there is only one three-dimensional person stages, but there are actually two different persons, which is, well, one is Alice up and one is Alice down. And here, there's some kind of uncertainty that Alice may claim that he may utter that I do not know whether I am Alice up or I am Alice down. And actually, though there might be only one single utterance, but here the pronoun I can refer to different four-dimensional persons. The one is Alice up, and the other one is Alice down. And here, as far as that we know, we cannot distinguish whether it is Alice up who feel uncertain, or whether it is just Alice down. So there is a kind of uncertainty here to ground the probability in Everett quantum mechanics, and this is just called this so-called self-location uncertainty. And I want to make several points for the Darby-Lewis theory of person identity. First is that actually I think a person in the Darby-Lewis theory is constituted of a three-dimensional person stages at different times. And actually, I think that the person stage is a primitive notion. It is not to say that it is more, in an ontological perspective, it is more important than a person stage. It is more essential, because as long as it is called a four-dimensional theory of persons, maybe it means that such four-dimensional person is more essential. But actually, what I want to mean is just that we can only define such four-dimensional persons via person stages. And in Darby-Lewis' root, it seems that we cannot do it conversely. We cannot just first define the persons and second to define the person stages. To define the four-dimensional person, it is just constituted by the sum of all those three-dimensional person stages along this line. And actually, it is in some degree arbitrary to determine whether some certain person stages can constitute a person. And actually, in Darby-Lewis's paper, he has discussed the case where a man can live a very long time. It can live one long time. And here, well, according to Parfit, this is to mean whether the person, well, when I was 100 years ago, and when I am 1,000 years ago, whether these two persons at different times are identical is a problematic. But according to Darby-Lewis, this is just to say whether the person stages along this line can constitute a person is a kind of some arbitrary, and it is of kind of some degree. According to Darby-Lewis, the existence of a person can be of some degree, but the identical of such person is not of any degree. Well, that to say that Darby-Lewis acknowledges that the existence of four-dimensional person can be a matter of degree. And the second is that actually when at this stage, the Alice said that I'm not certain that whether I am Alice up or whether I am Alice down, the mental states and thoughts, at least they're local. I mean, the mental action, all these acts, the expression of his thoughts are just three-dimensional entities rather than four-dimensional entities. At least, I mean, it is approximately local, just in this region before the branching. The three-dimensional entities are directly related to the three-dimensional person stage, and it is related to a four-dimensional person indirectly where their relations to the person stage. So, well, it is reasonable to say that such person stage express his his uncertainty about whether he is or whether he's at least up or whether he's at least down. But we may say that a person in an ontological perspective is only a four-dimensional entity. But such four-dimensional entity can just express such idea via the expression of such three-dimensional present stage. It is the present stage who thinks, acts, and utters the utterance in the first place, and the four-dimensional person who only think and utter utterances in a derived sense. So let us turn to this case here. If we point to this stage and ask whether it is up or whether it is down, I argue that there are no further facts to ground that it is up or it is down. And according to the Lewis theory, it is just to say that these present stages, when at this stage it alters that I do not know whether I am at least up or I am at least down. The solution is that if we compile these singular present stages along with all those present stages in this line, if we compile this line as a person at least up, then this person is at least up. And if we compile the present stage here, the singular present stage here, along with all those present stages along this line, then it is at least down who is uttering the utterance. So this is just to say that, well, this is just translation that if this person is at least up, then he is at least up. If this person is at least down, then he is at least down. This is just by definition. And actually, that to say there are no further facts to determine whether it is at least up or whether it is at least down. It is just a choice up to our. It is just a degree up to our choice to whether to compile this person stage along this line as a person, or we compile this line as a person, right? And it is different different to the case that Levi Weidman talked about the Sleeping Beauty case as well. At this stage, this Alice can really express his uncertainty, and there are some facts to ground that uncertainty. To say, well, there are some facts to ground whether here the present stage belongs to Alice, it is at least down or it is at least up. But actually, in this case, if there is only one singular present stage before the fission, before the branching, there are no further facts to determine the uncertainty. Hence, if there is only one singular present stage before the branching, there cannot be such kind of uncertainty to ground the probability in Everett quantum mechanics. So actually, if we want to...
Excuse me, there are 5 more minutes including discussion.
Okay.
So it's up to you to decide what you
want. So the choice, I think this might be a motivation for Simon Saunders to develop his kind of dividing world in his 2010 paper. Well, that to say if there are different worlds along this line, and here there is the present stage, and here is the present stage. Actually, there are different present stages before the branching. This problem can be saved. I think this might be some kind of motivation for Saunders' paper, but actually I don't know. And so if we want to ground such kind of uncertainties, there must be at least more than one present stages before that branching. That is to say, there are 2 different present stages here, and this present stage it belongs to this person, and this is belong to this person. So actually, just that Alice does not know whether he is this 3-dimensional present stage, or whether he's another person, he is the other present stage. But actually, I think this will cause to some kind of violation of physicalism. To say, I think if we want to insist physicalism in this sense, we must follow the principle of so-called supervenience. That to say, the personal identity relations in the possible universe must just supervene on the physical descriptions of the whole universe. Well, maybe we can just argue that the bare fact that both are such 2 different 3-dimensional present stages supervene on at least 0, but which will lead to non-physicalism because there are no physical facts to ground that this present stage is related to this branch, and this present stage are related to that branch, because they are both ground on only one single physical state, at is zero, or maybe this is just kind of naive solution according to some Saunders, that to say we can just well, to our single physical state phi t, we can just split it into two different parts. We can just cut it in this quantum state of amplitude say and say plus. But actually, it is not. This route will also lead to non-physicalism, because maybe we can argue that these two different mathematical expressions it represents different present stages, but there are no physical laws to argue that why this present stage is related to the left branch, and why this present stage is related to the right branch. And well, actually, it seems that if we want to avoid such kind of non-physicalism, we should give give some kind of connection rule. We need to give some additional structure in Everett quantum mechanics, that to say which determines which present stage is related to this branch, when which is related to that branch. This is called the so-called connection rule, according to Everett, to Jeffrey Barrett in his book, Quantum Mechanics of World and Experience, of worlds and minds. And this actually will lead to some kind of hidden variable theory, which will undermine the most advantage of our Everett quantum mechanics. And second, I just want to argue that Simon Saunders' approach to ground such difference will not be successful as well. That to say, it will still falls into my discussions before. First, that according to Simon Saunders, try to by a personal thing into a branch part of ordered pair, but here, to say the representation of a present stage before the branching is non-local. Maybe it's just if we want to, if a representation of a three-dimensional entity is non-local, it is represented by an ordered part with a physical sense, with a three-dimensional physical expression and four-dimensional. And here he just wants you to use the consistent history approach to ground such difference. But I shall argue that such approach via the consistent history approach will still face exactly the same problem of the original David Lewis view. Just that, he just argued that this different world is just expressed by this operator via consistent history approach. And actually, this operator is just the multiply all the operator along this line to represent the event here, to the P operator plus this operator, and all along this line and all along this line. And again, if we want to point this point to ask whether it is up or whether it is down, the solution will still be that if we join to let all those P operators along this line, then it will be Alice up. And if we join all the operators along this line, it will be Alice down. And actually, this is just to repeat some kind of the original David Lewis theory. So I think this can still not ground such kind of uncertainty in probability. And